Hey, hello everybody. My name is John Shutsky. I am from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, obvious from the shirt and from my slide presentation, slide background. I am a professor and I'm also an agricultural safety and health specialist at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I'll talk a little bit more about my background in a couple of minutes. I'm in what we call the Biological Systems Engineering Department. So I am an engineer and I do come at things from the perspective of how we can solve problems and make things better. But I also have a safety and health background. And again, I'm going to talk about a lot of things. Now, let me just sort of lay things out here a little bit. So this is a replacement presentation for a presentation that was going to be done in February of 2023. It was a snowy week. I believe that was actually, it would have been the week of approximately February 20th of 2023. I was not able to make it up. Actually, I think a number of speakers did not make it up for the middle part of that symposium, a symposium for farmers, growers, agronomists, CCAs, and especially for people who do custom work, whether you're a custom operator, a manure applicator. So even if you are not part of that group, I would really encourage you to watch this presentation. I'm doing it in a more general sense, and I'm hoping that there are people who maybe really need this type of information, whatever your occupation is on a farm, and that you can take it back and use it in a very practical sense. I should just start out by talking a little bit about my background. I grew up on a family farm in Northwest Indiana. And while I was never a custom operator, I've worked a huge amount with custom operators. I'll talk about that in just a second. Picture of the family farm. My dad actually stopped farming, got out of agriculture in terms of production officially in 2008, I believe it was. But then even after retirement, he continued to work at a local co-op. He delivered fertilizer, hauled anhydrous ammonia, did all kinds of sort of a jack of all trades, and including a lot of the things that people who are doing custom operations do. Experienced a lot of the same kind of like fatigue and all of the different types of issues you all face. Let me just note something on that. I want to give you a few ways to contact me, and I'm going to be posting this presentation. You'll find other things at my website. If you want to contact me directly, email is probably the best way to do so. It's Shutsky, Shuttske at WISC, W-I-S-C for Wisconsin, .edu. I'm at the University of Wisconsin. And then also my website is Ag Safety, pretty simple. It doesn't have to be lowercase or uppercase, agsafety.wisc.edu. I mentioned some of my past work working with people who are custom applicators and others. Just one quick little example. I know that this is difficult to see, but did a lot of work. This particular publication I just showed you is called Stress, Fatigue, and the Custom Applicator. So over many years, from the late 1990s through the early parts of the 2000s, I did a huge amount of work with custom operators. A lot of it was in Minnesota, but I also worked in a number of other states, a little bit here in Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa, some national work, about 6,500 in particular custom applicators for pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, those kinds of things. That included aerial application, people who fly airplanes. And I also did a decent amount of work with custom harvesters, particularly in the western part of the country, where they literally start down in the Southwest, Texas, and other parts of the country, and they work their ways into the plains of Canada doing custom operations. And stress and fatigue is a really big deal for that group. So if you're interested in that sort of information, I would encourage you to go ahead and get a hold of me. So let's talk a little bit about stress in agriculture. It's no secret, right? There's been so much attention paid to this issue. I'm not going to go through all of the details in this slide, but do recognize that there are a number of things that cause us stress. We call those things stressors, things that cause stress. These are also things you might view as threats. And there are a number of different issues that I get really concerned about as an agricultural safety and health specialist. One of the things I get really worried about is injuries. Farming is a dangerous, dangerous occupation. We have a fatality rate that's about 5 times higher, actually 7 times higher than all other industries combined. And if you have a lot of stress in your life and you don't work to manage and resolve it, it can result in a number of different health issues. Everything from high blood pressure to heart disease to type 2 diabetes, as an example. And it also creates issues connected to communication and being able to interact with family members and relationships and those kinds of things. We've been particularly concerned the last couple of years about stress during the times of COVID because of isolation. The other thing that I will just mention to you is that our farming population generally is older than the sort of general population, and so we do worry a little bit about people's ability to deal with stress, basically just based on their age. So let's just talk about stress. We do need to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts. I promise that I will not bore you with this, but we all know what happens. And I mentioned my past work with custom operators and custom or commercial applicators. When I was working with those people, we often found out that they were working sometimes 60 to 70, in some cases 100 hours a week. And it was quite interesting because I heard about people having all kinds of health-related issues, and safety is obviously a concern when you can't stop and you can't slow down and you can't take care of yourself. But the other thing I learned about is people hallucinating. I remember one case in particular where a person said, I was out driving in a field, it was late, it was twilight, almost dark, and he said it was like the fence just kind of moved over on me. The bottom line is he got a piece of equipment tangled up in a nearby fence, and part of it was probably related to the fatigue and the stress that he was under. Oftentimes we're working 7-day work weeks, and it can just be really difficult. When we talk about all of these issues that I just mentioned, what happens to us is our bodies begin to release chemicals. The brain signals the release of 2 hormones in particular, and you probably have heard about these: adrenaline, which speeds up your heart rate and increases blood pressure. The other one is called cortisol. Cortisol has an impact on our brain. It basically creates a sense of anxiety. It shuts down the part of our brain that is able to think very rationally, and it displaces some of those rational thoughts with, in some cases, anxious or irrational thoughts. And it's one of those reasons why when you're under a lot of stress, it can be really difficult to communicate, to have relationships, to maintain a spousal relationship, or to be able to deal effectively with your children. And so we're talking about threats. We're talking about stressors. And the reason why agriculture is so unique, whether you are in a service industry doing custom operation, or again, you're an agronomist or a veterinarian or another person providing services, or if you're a farmer or a farm worker, there are a number of things that are threats. They are the stressors that feed or fuel this chemical or this hormonal stress response. Among these, obviously, are the amount of worry that we have about financial conditions. And I do need to say this, that includes financial conditions when times are bad. That's pretty obvious, right? But even when times are good, there's still a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of concern. It takes a lot of wherewithal to run an agricultural business. Again, whether you're a service provider or a farmer, producer, rancher, whatever your role might be in production. We also know that obviously in agriculture, we've got weather concerns. We have all this change that we've got to worry about. Things are changing very rapidly in terms of technology, policy. In some cases, I hear about people who are really concerned about the fear, or they have a fear of missing out. They know all these changes are happening, and they may be concerned that they're not quite able to keep up with the change. The other thing that's unique about agriculture, in many cases, we're working in family-related businesses. We have a number of people who have health issues and health concerns. And so running a farm, performing farm service operations, again, being a custom operator or working with the farm community, if you have health issues, can be problematic. And then the other thing is that agriculture is really connected to policy, whether that's federal farm policy, trade policy. In recent years, we've had trade embargoes or tariffs and things like that. So that all can create these issues, the threat. And so what ends up happening, as I talked about, our brain, our body releases these chemicals, in response to the stress, which really does initiate the stress response. And what ends up happening, and I talked about this briefly, the part of our brain that is responsible for rational thinking, problem solving, being able to think through economic situations, making economic decisions, or again, as I talked about, maintaining a relationship, that part of the brain becomes far less functional. And what ends up happening is that the part of the brain that we might call the fear center takes over. It's actually fed, it becomes stronger. The fear response, the anxiety response becomes stronger as a result of the exposure to these stress hormones. So the brain activates the fear center and we become anxious, and that can be really problematic. Now, what's the reason I'm going through kind of a biology lesson here is we really need to understand that stress is not just in our head. I worry so much because people think, oh, I'm so stressed out, I'm not strong enough, I'm not able to cope. And the bottom line is these stress hormones cause the type of changes that, if not controlled, if not managed effectively, again, adrenaline and cortisol, it can become really, really difficult to function. That impact on our brain, again, we're not able to make good decisions. We're maybe not able to have good communications with other people. And then what sometimes happens is there's a consequence to that, right? We make a bad financial decision, or we have a bad communication or conversation with a person, and that bad decision or that bad conversation just further fuels the stress response, and it can become a bit of a vicious cycle, which can become difficult to control. Now, a couple things that I want to highlight for you. First of all, the stress response is natural. It is something that as human beings, we have evolved to have this response. So again, it's not a sign of weakness. Back in the days of cavemen and cavewomen, if you think about being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, let me just go back to that slide for a second. Being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, the people who survived, the people who had a finely tuned stress response were the ones that survived, and through evolution and the passing down of DNA and genetic information, it was those people who had a highly functional, highly tuned stress response that lived to see another day and to have children and to pass that trait along to future generations. The problem is now we are not cavemen and cavewomen. We don't have to worry about saber-toothed tigers. We also don't have the kinds of releases in terms of the physical energy that people back 100,000 years ago expended. And so the stress has really become a problem in sort of modern society. When I talk about modern society, I'm talking about the last several hundred years, but it seems really like in recent years, we have had a real crisis in terms of farm stress. We see that manifest by high suicide rates, high accident or fatality rates as a result of injuries on the farm. And again, that includes not only farmers, but for people who provide different types of services. And again, that would include people who are custom operators. So as an engineer, I mentioned my background in engineering, I think about this stuff from the perspective of fuel. I think about cortisol and adrenaline as being, it's the fuel, right? It is the chemicals that really do fuel this stress response that can be so negative if not channeled in the correct way. And if it's not something that we really pay attention to, and we need to be aware of the impacts that it's having. So the question becomes is, if you're talking about fuel, where's the gas pedal? Where's the fuel valve? Where's the throttle? It's a little bit like a thermostat. If the thermostat is not, if you don't have a way to sort of shut down the furnace or shut down the fuel to that stress response, you're going to continue to pump out those chemicals. And again, you will find yourself in that vicious cycle. The article that's pointed to with the green arrow, it's not a mistake that it's green. It's actually the throttle, the fuel throttle on my dad's John Deere 4020. When I first learned to drive a tractor, it's like, where's the gas pedal? I was pretty young. Where's the gas pedal? I understood how to drive a vehicle, motor vehicle, car in particular, but I didn't necessarily understand the idea of a throttle. It's similar with stress. And with stress, not only do we have a throttle, we have multiple throttles. And so think about things from that perspective. Where are these throttles that allow us to cut down? You can't turn it off entirely. The stress response, by the way, is not a bad thing. But where are those throttles that allow us to sort of like take away some of the fuel so that it's not a runaway situation, creating these kinds of problems? Now, one of the things that I would like for you to do, if you don't mind, is to pause the video in just a moment. And I would like for you to think about, what do you do? Where are your throttles? And in the website, or the video notes that are below the actual video, you can click on the notes. And I have a couple of templates. The first template that I want to talk about, it looks something like this. And what I would like for you to do on this template is to just think about, what are a couple of things that make a difference for you? When you have stress in your life, what are one or two specific things that you do that make you feel better? And when we feel better, that's usually a result of de-throttling or defueling the stress response. I'd also like for you to give this some thought. One of the things we know in stress management is when you take the time to write something down, and you don't have to use my template necessarily. Maybe put this on your phone. Maybe just think about it for a second. But when you give things thought and you put them onto paper, it helps you to kind of come back and revisit those at a later time. And the other thing that I would like for you to do is share that with another person. As you're thinking about that, when we say feel better, where's your stress throttle? What are the things that make you feel better? You know what I'm talking about. What are the things that make you feel less edgy, maybe make you feel a little bit more calm, able to think with more clarity? The other thing, and this is the biggest impact for me, is sleep. What are the things that when I do them, and I do them well, and I do them regularly, I sleep better, I maybe enjoy the moments of time and feel the kinds of joy that we all have in life. What are the things that we can all do to do that just a little bit better than we now do? So I'm going to just give you a moment to do that. If you need to, shut the video off and then come back. On my next slide, I again mentioned this. We have multiple throttles. Unlike my dad's John Deere 4020, or back in the day, the Chevy pickup truck that I learned to drive first out in the field, is it had a single gas pedal or a single throttle. In agriculture, again, regardless of your role, we have multiple throttles. And I'm going to not go through all these right now, but I am going to go through these one at a time just to let you know that some of these might sound a little, for lack of a better word, fluffy. You might have heard these things all the way back in high school when you took health education in high school. And the reason why we taught those things back in high school is because they really do make a difference from a health perspective. And in terms of all of these things working together, taken together as a constellation of activities and behaviors, we do know they keep people healthy, they keep people happy, and in terms of safety, they can really make a huge difference to reduce the burden of injuries and accidents and the fatalities that occur so frequently in agriculture. So if I'm a custom operator and I'm harvesting a crop, or I'm spreading a chemical, or I'm spreading manure, whatever it is that I might be doing, I'm an applicator, whatever that occupation might be, my guess is most of you are probably working with equipment, right? You're working either with a harvester, a sprayer, a tractor, a truck, whatever that piece of equipment might be. And there is probably not a single one of you who would watch this video who would say, yeah, I'm going to head out to the field and I'm not going to think about fuel. Or if I think about fuel, I'm going to put junky, crappy quality fuel in something like this, Custom forage harvester. That fuel, just when we talk about machinery and equipment, it's just a natural thing that we need to stop and think about it. But what I would like for you to think about is, you could do this for yesterday, whatever day you might be watching. Think back to yesterday or maybe last weekend. And again, take out my template that I've provided to you. And what I'd like for you to think about is, you personally write down a note or two. How did you fuel your body? Specifically, think about yesterday or the last couple of days, whatever you might be able to remember. What did you have for breakfast? Did you have breakfast? What about lunch? Did you eat lunch? Do you remember what you had for lunch? Did you eat a meal in the evening? Maybe also just think about a little bit. And I want you to just pause for the 45 seconds to reflect on this just a little bit. This is an important exercise because there's sometimes we skip breakfast, we have a quick lunch, we sit down for dinner, we wonder why we're just absolutely drained of energy. And yet you think back, it's like, what did I have for lunch? Oh, now I remember. And maybe it was something good, maybe it was something not so good. Now, when I talk about things being a little bit fluffy, I would love to see everybody eat like this. Do I eat like this? Lots of balance, lots of whole grains, lots of fruits and vegetables, dairy products, protein, whether it is red meats or fish or chicken or eggs or, again, dairy products. This is probably a little bit silly, right? Like, who actually eats like this? There may be people watching who do. We all know what good eating looks like. We also all know what bad eating looks like. And I'm going to talk about that just a bit more in a second. But what I want to note for you is balance. If you look at this plate, we've got a balance of different things. Yeah, we've got some whole grains. We've got fruits and vegetables, right? When we talk about fuel and needing fuel, fruits and vegetables are super important, as is protein. And what I'd like for you to think about is lean protein. Again, that can be meat and some of the other things that I talked about. You don't have to be. In fact, many of you are probably not vegetarians. But if you are a vegetarian or if you're a person who does not eat a lot of meat, certainly thinking about protein in your diet is something that's really important, regardless of the type of diet you have or the type of food you eat. The reason why I wanted to just sort of unpack this just a little bit is we all know what good eating looks like, but we all also can probably relate to this. And again, I'm going to take this upon myself. Yeah, there are times I'm out traveling. There are times I am super busy where I'm maybe working 12 or 13 or 14-hour days. I'm on the road. I do a lot of traveling, and I maybe simply don't have time to sit down and eat a decent meal. However, we all need to recognize that if this makes up the majority of your calories, sugar, a lot of fat, a lot of caffeine, guilty as charged, but we need to maybe at times sit back and think about how we might add a little bit more balance and think about the fact of our body being a machine. And just like the machine you might operate in the field, that machine needs fuel. It also needs hydration. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this slide other than to say the majority of us walk around most of the day dehydrated. And again, if you're not thinking about hydration, if you're not thinking about the fuel, it can be a real problem in terms of stress. You get to the end of the day, you're exhausted. Think about the impact of your hydration level and your fuel level. Is your fuel gauge on empty? Are you well hydrated? Quick, easy check. You can all do this. We can all do this. I do this every day. Check your urine color. If you are fully hydrated and healthy, there is a good chance your urine is going to be clear or have just a tiny bit of color. If your urine has any color, including yellow or any other color, brown or any other color, you are simply not getting enough water. You're not getting enough fluid. I don't care what fluid you drink. Try to avoid caffeine. Try to avoid sugary drinks. And obviously, water is a really good way to think about handling your hydration during the course of a day. We also really want to encourage people to think about healthcare. In many cases, when I talk about people or when I talk to or with people who are dealing with a lot of stress and they feel incredibly anxious, maybe they feel very low energy, maybe they are concerned about depression. One of the things that I really am concerned about is we don't do a good job of getting healthcare. So I would challenge you to think about, when was your last visit? I'm due. I'm going to admit to you, since the pandemic, I've had a couple of virtual video visits with my local physician. You can practically walk to the clinic where I belong to, but it's been a while. Getting a checkup is not a fun thing, but it is really something that is important. Not only every 5 years when you're really, really sick, but periodic visits with your health professional. And if you are a person who's feeling all of those feelings that I talked about, anxiety, depression, you simply don't have energy. You wake up in the morning, you feel like you've had a good night's sleep, but you're absolutely exhausted. It's really important thing to talk to your family doctor, whether it's a physician, a nurse practitioner, or whoever your primary provider might be. And the reason for that is in many cases, mental health and your ability to think about stress and manage your stress is often very, very intertwined with physical health. So get in there, make that appointment, get seen by somebody who knows what they're doing. When we talk about that, it's also important not only for your health, but with other aspects of your life to make sure you're consulting with people on other issues. Whether you run an agribusiness, a service business, or just your own personal things, financial help, legal help. If you are also farming, production-related help, whether that's from a veterinarian or a person who is an expert in animal nutrition or a certified crop advisor or an agronomist, it is really important to think about who can I reach out to so that I don't have those feelings of having to go it alone. We know that reaching out and connecting to other people, including not only experts who can help you, but also family, friends, neighbors, people in your school, people in your church, that act of reaching out and not going it alone is an important part of stress management. I want to talk a little bit about sleep. And when I am super stressed, this is probably the one that affects me the most, is my sleep. I oftentimes go to bed exhausted at night. I rarely have difficulty falling asleep. But if I look at my sleep patterns through the course of the night, it's a problem if I'm stressed waking up in the middle of the night. In some cases, it's related to caffeine. It's related to what I ate during the day. But sleep is really important. If you think about the idea that nutrition, eating well is the fuel, the sleep part of it is kind of like the repair and maintenance that we all need to do on a daily basis. And much of that repair and maintenance in the brain and in the rest of the body happens through sleep. So let me, again, just pause here for a few minutes, because when I ask you to stop and slow down for 30 seconds, it really helps you to pause and really think about how does this information apply to you? And so I'd like for you to think about what are the things that you do well. Don't focus on the bad stuff. Think about the things that you actually do really well when it comes to sleep. It might be that you go to sleep at a regular time every night. It might be that you, I'll talk about some of those here in just a second. Just give you a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds to stop and think and pause the video if you want. So let's talk about sleep strategies. Okay, first of all, I mentioned a couple of these. Regular sleep, good idea. When I talk to people, they're like, I can get by on 4 hours a night. That might be a badge of honor for you. I do find that a lot. I find that a lot with dairy farmers. It's a badge of honor because they can get by on 4 to 6 hours a night. For a typical healthy adult human being, 4 to 6 hours is probably not enough sleep. I usually tell people to shoot for 7. If you can get 8, that's awesome. But in many cases, that includes getting to bed at a regular time at night, having a regular wake-up time. And I do recognize that for some people, that's going to be 4 a.m. So then you're going to want to adjust things on the other end. And when I talk about 6, 7, 8 hours being ideal, that includes actual sleep time. That's not just the amount of time you lay around in bed, tossing and turning, and trying to go to sleep. I've already talked about caffeine. Some of us are really sensitive to caffeine. I love my coffee early in the morning. Absolutely, I am excited to wake up in the morning to have coffee, but if I have coffee after 12 noon, or definitely after 1:30, even if it's a large, like a Pepsi or a Coke, I really have a difficult time falling asleep. So think about your caffeine intake. The other thing that I am just going to recommend to you is thought I had my phone right here with me, is to ditch the devices. When you go to bed at night, ditch the device. I actually have to take my phone and put it in another room. If you cannot do that because you're expecting notifications or alerts, you probably want to give some thought to how you can adjust those notifications. Obviously, if you are on call, if you have to be present because of a potential emergency, or you've got workers or coworkers that are going to be trying to get in touch with you, really important that you have the notifications set. But really try to avoid the temptation to get on your phone, especially about an hour before you go to bed at night. We do know that it's that light from the phone stimulates the retina, the other parts of the eye. It's sort of like sunlight, and it really does this stimulate the brain to keep thinking and to keep going, and is not at all a friendly helper for getting enough sleep. Let's just talk briefly about physical activity. So physical activity, I'm guessing a lot of you are thinking like, oh, I get more than enough exercise. I get so much activity. I really would encourage you to think about it in terms of a year-round type of behavior. Sleep and physical activity really are the two magic bullets. There have been a number of brain MRI studies that suggest that these chemicals have far less impact on the brain function if we get enough activity. When I say activity, that assumes that you have a blessing from a health professional. Again, preferably a physician or a nurse practitioner or somebody else. Even something like walking 3, 4, 5 times a week can be really helpful. Plan for it. It's something to look forward to at the end of the evening. It actually is also a good time and a good opportunity to get back and connect with family, with loved ones, with your kids, with your spouse, whoever that person might be. And it also, if you are walking, even if you're walking by yourself, it does have the opportunity to help you open up, clear your mind, and to be able to think. And part of that is because you are reducing the impact of these stress hormones that I've talked about. So lots of throttles. We've talked about nutrition, sleep. We've talked about the importance of making sure that you do get enough activity. A 3, 4, 5 times a week is very helpful. Even if you think like, why would I need more activity? My job now is so physically strenuous. That's probably a good thing. So maybe you don't need the activity piece. But my guess is the majority of you probably do. Or you may get it for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 months of the year, but think about this as a year-round type of thing that can really make a difference. So that's some of the information about your body as kind of a machine. In a moment, I am going to talk more about what about some of the other things? What about our mind? What about our spirit? And what I want you to think about right now is to, again, just sort of pause the video for a second and think about, okay, is there anything that Shutsky, the speaker, just said, like, yeah, that sounds good, but that's not going to work for me? It's really helpful sometimes to identify your attitudes and where there might be barriers. You might say like, yeah, I don't have time to eat lunch. It's like, okay, that is potentially a barrier. You may not have time for lunch. So then you may need to think about other types of strategies. Maybe it's packing a lunch in the morning. Again, if you work for a co-op or you work for a custom operator, maybe think about, how might all of you together plan for and think about and have access to food throughout the day. I just throw that out as one example, because if we let these things stand as barriers or fences between you and desirable stress management behavior, chances are we're never going to actually make the kinds of changes that need to be made. So again, I'm just going to give you a minute or two to think about that. Now let's shift gears. Body is like a machine. Our brain is it's also a bit like a machine, but it's also a little bit more complicated. And what I would like for what I'd like to do to just spend about the last 10 minutes or so talking about a program that we have developed. It's called WeCope. WeCope is all about 11 different, I'm going to call them skills or activities that we know from medical and mental health and psychological and biological research really, really do make a difference. They're not these sort of mechanical, physical eating, not eating Snickers bars, avoiding caffeine. These are things that we can do that really help our mind and our spirit. And the reason that I've added these to the presentation is some of you may have heard me speak on these other, the sort of body as a machine things before. But what I would learn as I was out talking to farmlanders and veterinarians and people who work for co-ops is like, we need some stuff for up here, for how we might think and how we might do things a little bit differently mentally. And the WeCope program is what that stuff is all about. Let me just mention also, the WeCope program is largely based on the research of a person who works in psychology at Northwestern University. We've worked very closely with her. Her name is Dr. Judy Moskowitz. Judy actually grew up here, I believe, on a dairy farm in Wisconsin over near Fond du Lac. And her work is renowned throughout the world. And what we've tried to do is to adapt the WeCope program to be applicable to people who work in agriculture. I'm not going to go through all 11 of the skills. I do put this out as a little bit of maybe a teaser. Maybe you want to follow up. We do schedule WeCope programs both online, but also in person around the state of Wisconsin, probably in the future, increasingly outside of the state. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a teaser. The first one that I want to talk about is gratitude. Again, this might sound to some people a little fluffy, right? Like, gratitude. I hear this. I see TV shows and they're talking about gratitude. It works. It makes a difference. And when we talk about gratitude, the reason it works is so often we get tangled up in the things in our life that are not going well, or the things that are causing stress, or the things that are causing anxiety and worry. And we oftentimes don't stop and take the time, I'm just going to say it, to smell the roses. And we know that people who do that periodically, you don't have to do it 24 hours a day, but people who do that a couple times a day, even if it's for a brief moment, even if it's for 30 seconds, if you stop and think about and express your gratitude for the things around you, it physically improves your health. Mentally, it improves your mental well-being. It is a feeling of thankfulness and appreciation. If you stop and think about it, if I surveyed people watching this video, what are some things you do to manage your stress? I might get prayer from some of you. And we know that one of the things we oftentimes do in prayer is we express gratitude. So gratitude has a long history. We're hearing a lot about it now on TV and the media, but it really does have a long history and it really does make a difference. When we talk about gratitude, there are always things in our life that are going well. They might be related to our children, to our family, even simply to the beauty that surrounds you. There's times I'm out driving, it might be midnight, and I have had a 18-hour workday doing my extension work, traveling around Wisconsin, talking to farmers. And if I stop, even if it's on an interstate, pull over at an exit and just kind of look up into the sky and you think about the beauty that surrounds us, or it might be a sunset, or it might be, those first shoots of corn that are coming through the ground. There are always things to stop and to be grateful for. Write them down. If you have a chance, write them down or shoot a picture or sharing them with another person. Again, gratitude, the research shows us less negative emotion. When we do have illnesses or when we have chronic health conditions, oftentimes people who express gratitude have less symptoms as a result of that behavior and that activity, better sleep quality, and again, as I talked about, better satisfaction in life. So this is the time. Again, I want you to pull out your sheet, or if you don't have access to the sheet or the template, I would like for you to just pause right now for a moment I'd like for you to write down, like, what are one or two things that you're grateful for. If you don't want to write them down, you can stop and think about them in the last day or two. They might be tiny little small things. They might be things that you otherwise really haven't thought about recently. And just pause for just a short time and kind of let that sink in and think about how that feels to you to think about the good things in your life. I have a friend, her name is Robin Kinney. Robin actually used to work for the American Farm Bureau Federation. She worked out of the Washington, D.C. office. She's since moved back and works for Farm Bureau in Minnesota. And Robin is a master of this. Robin does her gratitude expressions on Facebook. And so every morning I look forward to waking up and Robin is expressing something that's cool. It might be something that she's grateful for. It might be an observation. It might be sort of just sharing a good thought and a good feeling with another person. In her case, it's all of the people who follow her on Facebook. Most of her things, since she used to work for the Farm Bureau in Washington and now works for Farm Bureau Minnesota, most of those things are connected to agriculture, which I particularly like. But you can see how this makes you feel. You know, a little bit of humor, a little bit of just sort of stopping, pausing, thinking, and then sharing back out with people does make a difference with stress. Another thing that I want to talk about is, so when we talk about gratitude, that also involves living in the moment. Another thing that's really quite important is giving yourself a roadmap, a plan. And I'm going to talk briefly about planning and visioning, thinking about stopping, pausing, and thinking about what your day is going to look like, or maybe what your week is going to look like. And again, from the perspective of mental health and stress management, when we lay out a roadmap for ourselves, that those feelings of overwhelmment get far less. I do this often. Actually, I do this with this template because I developed this template. But I also do this when I don't have time to sit down and actually go through this template. I do it with a checklist. And a lot of you are probably good at writing things down, checking off the items on your checklist. There's a reason why that makes you feel good. We know that the science supports actually those kinds of activities for helping us with mental health. So I did pause my recording there for just a moment. And let me just talk about this template. Again, this template is linked in the YouTube. I've got links for the various materials that I'm using here for my presentation. It is linked. Now, I want you to think about planning. What are we planning? We're planning on how we're going to use our time, right? So just if you stop and think about it, time is probably the most precious resource most of us have. We have to be really careful about how we use our time, how we allocate that resource. So when we talk about farming and we talk about agriculture generally, farming is all about maximizing all of the resources we have. It's the seeds or the animals or the feed or the fertilizer or the soil and the water. And our time should be managed just as carefully. We should be thinking about the science of how we manage and use our time. So what I am going to suggest to you is that once a week, just try this, okay? Once a week, you pull this template out and you think about what are the one or maybe two most important, most stressing, most things that you feel anxious about for the coming week. You're probably not going to do this for your entire to-do list for the whole next week, but I want you to plan for what are those one or two activities. You got a date, place here. You could also list the location, upper left-hand corner. Let me just go ahead and go to the template. This is one that I have filled out. So let's just say it's a Sunday. It is the Sunday before February 22nd or March 22nd or whenever this might be. I'm at the kitchen. I'm at the breakfast bar. I'm drinking my coffee. You'll notice that on the left-hand side there is a box. If we can stop, pause, think about all the awesome things that are happening around us, it puts us in the mindset of being able to prepare for that stressful week upcoming. So again, going back to the whole idea of gratitude, okay, so this is actually one I filled out. winter's been okay. And actually, I'm sitting here drinking my coffee. It looks like the sun, if it's not shining, it wants to be shining. Actually, today, that's the case. Not quite sunny, but wanting to get there. By the way, this coffee I'm drinking is absolutely amazing. I roast my own coffee, so I think a lot about coffee. And this particular morning is like, oh, I'm really grateful for those coffee growers in Brazil who had all of the plantations and were able to bring this coffee here to my table in Cross Plains, Wisconsin. Oh, what am I grateful for? At the time I'm presenting this, I have one of my kids is home sick from work, and you might guess why. Still one of the remnants of COVID and the pandemic. But I'm so grateful for my kids. There's times like this, it can be stressful having kids, but they're just my pride and joy. What would I ever do without them? As I sort of pause in my chair, this only needs to take me 30 seconds. Also, what am I thinking about today? How am I feeling? I'm thinking about everything I got to do to get ready for spring. Man, it's going to be busy. I am eager. There's still snow and ice on the ground. I'm eager. I got energy. I feel a little bit anxious. And by the way, when I feel anxious up here, it gives me the sort of physical sensations like I got ants in my pants, right? You guys have all felt that situation before. So kind of stopping, thinking, grounding yourself, reflecting on your mental sensations, the positives and the negatives, and then also your physical sensations will put you in the frame of mind to actually develop a plan for the coming week. What are the things that I'm most worried about? This is gnawing at me. It's been gnawing at me since last fall. We've got machines out there that are right now. They're not active because it's not the active time of the year. I did an inventory the other day, and I'm aware of at least 6 hydraulic lines that need attention. They got to be fixed. My biggest concern is they got to be leak free before the season starts, and it stresses me out. Oh, what am I going to do about that? I know that's on my to-do list. Every week I start my week. Well, this is the week. Because I am choosing to farm my time, this is the week that we're going to get her done, right? So I've named this as a big thing that's been gnawing at me and causing me a lot of pressure. So when we talk about farming our time, one of the hard things is to get started. The question A is, first of all, F is focus. What am I going to focus on in the coming week? A is, what are the actions that I'm going to need to take to get things started? Okay, first thing I need to do, I know I need to make a list. I need to actually go out there. I need to figure out exactly what it is that actually really does have to be replaced. I actually need to get either the model number or the part number, and I need to get that written down on a piece of paper or on my phone, captured as notes, or however you take down information. And I need to get a hold of the dealer. I need to actually get things ordered. They're not going to order themselves, right? So I need to get myself started. What are the resources I'm going to need? I might need some manuals, some operator's manuals. I might need some tools just to make sure that this is not just an issue of a loose line or a loose fitting or a loose connection. Probably going to need a handful of shop rags. Probably am going to need to have my phone camera. I'm not going to remember if I got 6 different machines. Maybe I'm going to need to take some pictures. And I'm going to be probably getting some phone numbers so that I can start calling people once I have it figured out what I'm going to need. So the idea is these things that are big and overwhelming can be broken down into subtasks or components. What am I going to focus on? What are those first couple actions to get me going? What are the resources I'm going to need? And then, by the way, how am I going to measure success? What will success actually look like? Well, in this case, it's pretty simple. By the end of next Friday, maybe it's not this Friday because it's going to take a while to get parts in and things, but by the end of next Friday, I'm going to have everything in, replaced, and all 6 lines will be fully functional and fully operational. And guess what? I can then move my focus to other tasks, other things that are causing me angst and worry. This seems super simplistic, but there are so many things that we have going in our work life that really stress us out. And if you think about setting goals, having a focus, and really getting started getting moving, thinking about those resources, and actually setting a timeline for yourself. When you have that sense of accomplishment, it makes a big difference in terms of helping you reduce that stress. So again, there is a template here for you to use. I encourage you to do so. If you are interested in additional information from WeCope, this website is available. I did talk about this at the beginning. If you go to agsafety.wisc.edu, and if you look at the top bar, Outreach and Education, right now the only thing that is linked under that top bar is the Coping Better podcast. Coping Better is WeCope, and there are, I believe, 7 different podcasts that explore these 11 different behaviors and practices that we talked about. Not everything is going to resonate with you, but if, I talked about coping, talked about gratitude, putting up a text message or a Facebook post, sharing with other people, and then also that one about farming your time. If you're interested in the other elements or the other, I guess it would be 9 practices of WeCope, the information is there for you. You can download these. They're also available on both Spotify and Apple Play. And would encourage you to have a listen. And if you wanted more information, you're welcome to follow up and get more from us. Final ideas. My family here is my wife, Kate, on the left, my mother-in-law on the right. She just had her 84th birthday. Communication and connection is really important. Oftentimes during really stressful times in our life, we tend to check out. It is natural human tendency to withdraw, to pull back. You're just so busy. You're just so overwhelmed. You're exhausted. You're tired. But stressful times are the time that your body and brain is being signaled, hey, maybe this is the time to try to overcome that in a very deliberate way and connect with other people. In many cases, other people can help give you perspective. It's part of that gratitude piece. When I spend time with my family, I feel, no matter how busy I am, I feel that deep sense of gratitude for everything I have. Other people, whether they're coworkers, neighbors, family, friends, help you to solve problems. So resist that temptation. One of the things that we know when people are super stressed out in our rural agricultural communities of Wisconsin, when they're super stressed, they stop showing up. They may stop showing up at the local coffee shop. They may stop attending school sporting events. You may see that they're not in church anymore. But that's the time when we really do need to be reaching out to other people. So I'm going to actually also throw this out to a challenge. If you have people who you have around you, loved ones, friends, family, coworkers, neighbors, and you see that behavior, you see them stopping, and you used to see them at the coffee shop every day for the last 15 years, but you haven't seen them for the last 8 weeks, it might be a good opportunity to check in and just simply ask people how they're doing. Checking in is a really big, important part of all of this. We're all in stress together. We're all very interconnected. As I talked about, social contact with other people, it's one of those throttles that I talked about, and I really do encourage you to think about it, especially when you have that tendency to pull in, to hunker down, to withdraw. Think about that actually as a time to reach out and connect. As hard as that might seem, it is something that we know from the research and science really does make a difference. A couple of other resources that I wanted to share with you. Resilient Farms and Families. I've done a lot of work, as you can probably see in this area, on farm and agricultural stress. You see the website down at the bottom. This is offered through Extension. We consider this to be a resource center. A lot of the things that I've talked about here today are in the Resilient Farms and Farm Stress resource site. And another thing is I now offer a lot of my programs through a funded program that I now help lead. It's called Farmwell Wisconsin. Farmwell Farmwell Wisconsin. If you just search Farmwell Wisconsin on Google, you'll find it, or farmwellwi.org. A lot of different resources, including the things that I've talked about here. Access to our programs, access to a lot of newsletter information, other things you can read, videos you can watch, and would encourage you to have a look at that. So that's like a lot to throw at you. Hopefully by pausing a few times, reflecting, asking you to participate, writing a few things down in your template. Maybe it's also, filling out the farm goal template. Hopefully these are things that will make a difference for you. You don't have to do them all. If you do any of them, you don't have to do them perfectly. But again, we know from the science and the research, they do make a difference. Please get in touch with me if you have any questions. If not, I look forward to hearing from you in the future. And hopefully the next time we're able to be together in person and we're not interrupted by snow and ice and rain and all the weather that we have in Wisconsin. But if we are, I hope that this video has been helpful.